Two of the most.
We get so absorbed in our farms and our animals and our crops that we're the last thing that we think about. So having just the opportunity to meet with somebody and talk with them for 40 minutes about your concerns and what limitations you have and how you could potentially be better for yourself by just adjusting your work habits it's really important.
In this episode of Voices from the Field, Margo Hale, NCAT's Southeast Regional Director and Director of NCAT's Arm to Farm program, visits with NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist and farmer veteran Mike Lewis. Mike and his family operate a diversified farm in southeast Kentucky. Mike talks about the farm's enterprises and how USDA programs have helped him meet his farm goals. Mike also discusses two programs, AgrAbility and the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, that focus on the physical and mental needs of many farmers. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Margo Hale, NCAT Southeast Regional Office Director based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And on today's episode, I am going to be talking with Mike Lewis, one of NCAT's newer Sustainable Agriculture Specialists who works from his farm in Kentucky. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, thanks for having me, Margo. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, last time we talked was this summer for the podcast when we introduced you to all of our clients here at ATTRA. So it's really great to visit with you again. And today's episode, we're going to talk about some programs and resources that, initially these are programs for military veterans who are interested in farming, but really a lot of the things we're going to talk about today are applicable to lots of farmers. So not just our farmer veterans. So Mike has some really good resources and things to share with us today. So Mike, just to give everybody a little refresher, would you please tell everybody about your farm and your background and kind of what led you to this space?
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk about that, I guess. First, geographically speaking, my family lives in farms at the western foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in southeastern Kentucky. We have a pretty diversified farm where we raise livestock, fresh market produce, and some pulses and legumes for local markets and to feed some of our stock. And I guess the largest portion of our operation right now would be our pasture. We raise forest-based pastured pork, which is the largest piece of our operation. And, I actually, the reason that I guess I got involved in this work way back when, it seems like a lifetime ago, especially under our current confinement situation. Time seems to have changed the way in which it progresses for me. But, I started in this work when I started thinking about having kids. And I started thinking about, what I was leaving them, and this sort of concept of, not in the ego sense, but this concept of what is this legacy that I'm leaving, right? I'm thinking that my children are the legacy, the farm is the legacy, and how I teach them to care for the land and other people. So that's how I got actively involved in trying to, create a better food system and a better community. Prior to NCAT, I worked in Extension, the University of Kentucky, supporting local farmers, primarily with the AgrAbility project. And then, of course, I jumped at the chance to join the team at NCAT because this is an organization whose body of work sort of mirrors what I had hoped to leave as my air quotes are going up because as a legacy for my children and for other people to look back and say, hey, what did this guy do?
Yeah.
And now times are changing and farmers have to be able to adapt on, it seems like at the drop of a hat now. So I think it's exciting to be able to be here with you talking about what types of programs are out there. There's a lot of support for farmer veterans and just farmers as well, as you alluded to the fact we're not just going to be talking about things that are specific to veterans, but they do have overlap for other producers as well. So I'm excited to talk about that in these changing times for sure. We could all use a little support now and then.
Yeah, that's right. And our role here at NCAT, besides our specialists here to, be able to provide technical assistance and training and all of the resources, we're also here to be connectors and to help people know about the other resources and the programs that are available and help farmers as they are navigating all of those programs and accessing the help that's out there. So we're glad to be able to share some of these resources with everyone today. So Mike, I have done a few podcasts over the last couple of years with different farmer veterans talking about the USDA programs that they have utilized. So just briefly, this won't be the main topic of our discussion today, but will you share some of the USDA programs that you've utilized on your farm and, how those programs have helped you meet your farm goals?
Yeah, absolutely. The two biggest ones that we've utilized are the NRCS equip grants and cost shares. And then I guess we'll go back to that. And then secondarily, we've also used the microloan program to get some infrastructure added. And also while we were expanding, that capital really allowed us to expand without worrying about, how we were going to get the kids to school and all the bills and all those other things that happen in life.
Right.
That was a big deal to us when we were expanding that microloan program. It allowed us to focus what was important to us, doing the job right and not cutting corners. And that having access to that capital really helped us. And we're discussing it right now. We may in fact be applying for some more funds through that or some program like that as we look to expand our pastured pork operation. The biggest thing for us now are these cost share and equip grants, right? The high tunnels allowed us to extend our season production for our tomatoes, which is a huge market for us, so local tomatoes. So we're able to get our tomatoes in a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier, and we're able to carry them through in the high tunnels through December for local markets, which is a huge added bonus for us. And then secondarily, now that we're facing these climate issues on our farm with the weather patterns changing and the increases of rain, it was critical that we had access to some of those cost shares on the fencing, being able to keep our stock out of high erosion areas and being able to really make sure that we weren't contributing to what was happening naturally. These types of things happen naturally. Maybe not. Maybe they're happening because of what we've done over the last 100 years to the land. But you and I weren't there for that.
Right.
So it is a natural process. But being able to have those perimeters to keep our stock out of those areas, and also secondarily being able to move them from the bottoms. That's been a big transition for us over the last couple of years. Is moving our stock from the bottoms to the top. We're a mountain farm, and we had serious flooding this last year, and that's caused some damage to our fields and our livestock. So being able to access those cost shares and payback programs to expand our fencing into the woods has been a critical piece of us successfully operating our farm. So I'd say those are the two big programs that we've used.
And really, those are two of the most common that we see, especially, beginning farmers as they're getting their operations up and running. Access to that microloan is so important. And the equip program that, is really so versatile. There are so many different cost shares available through equip. So we will make sure and link in the show notes links to those programs. So if you are not familiar with those USDA programs, you can get some more information. But it's great to hear how those programs have helped you on your farm and, really alleviate some potential resource concerns and also just help extend your season and help with marketing and production. And you talked about how the fencing has helped with all of your rain, but heck, I bet the high tunnel also helps with all that rain. Keeping excessive amounts of rain off of those tomatoes is really important too.
It seems like the opposite, right? Usually we want them to keep the cold out, but now I'm like, keep that rain out. I'm going to be in here every week with neem and some
right
biological trying to control mold. And I did forget to mention that we did get some cost share for conservation plantings for some native willows along our creek beds to help with retention of soil as well. So there's a lot of options with those programs. Sometimes it can be overwhelming looking at what's available and trying to figure out what's best for you. But
right.
Of course, those are things that we're here to help with.
Exactly. That's right. Give us a call or send us an email. That's exactly right. We're here to help answer those questions. So on those conservation planning, did you plant willows? Is that what that was? Or was it just helping to provide that habitat?
It was, we've actually planted some, and it was evaluating. We actually got some help from University of Kentucky Extension, their water quality specialist, to come in and help us with the planning. And then through that, we connected with 2 other farmers that had done larger restoration plantings for the state, and fish and wildlife and forestry. And then we were able to access some of those trees and plantings for that. So we've done a little bit of staking. We'll be doing a lot more willow staking this spring, probably close to 8,000 to 10,000 willow stakes going in on our creek beds, and really trying to control some erosion. Just there's benefits to living in the bottom of a holler, but there's definitely 1 or 2 downsides that we're learning about now as the weather changes.
Yes. Well, I think that's for any piece of property, any farm, there are benefits and there are challenges to all of these different landscapes. So that's
not all sunshine and daisies.
Right. It's all sunshine and daisies everywhere. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. That's a really, a good program to hear about, and, maybe something that folks haven't really heard about or thought about. And so thanks for sharing about that conservation planning as well. Okay. So Mike, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you on the podcast, where I know you're involved and have been involved with 2 programs that I think have really widespread applicability and are programs that I think a lot of people don't really know about. And so I want to talk to you today about AgrAbility, which you mentioned earlier, and also your work with the FRSAN network. So let's start with AgrAbility. And will you just tell folks a little bit about that program and some of your experiences and how you can see AgrAbility being able to help farmers and ranchers?
Yeah, I'd love to. AgrAbility is a wonderful program. It is funded by NEFA. And I believe that, unless they've updated it since I left, that their tagline is cultivating accessible agriculture. And I think that sums it up in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it from broad strokes. But agriculture is one of the riskiest jobs that we can do if we start breaking down numbers of injuries and accidents. And what the AgrAbility project is designed and funded to do is to help farmers or ranchers that have gone through some sort of accident, whether that's an amputation or, hearing loss or vision. I mean, they really run the gamut in terms of how they support farmers with limitations. But the idea is that, just because you have a disability or an accident or something that's occurred to you, that you shouldn't, the goal is to keep you on the farm, right? To make sure that you're still farming. So what the AgrAbility specialist will do is work with the farmer to perform a site assessment, right? And that site assessment could lead to assistance with funding. AgrAbility doesn't have money to fund things for farmers, but they have the access and the contacts with agencies that do. Most of the funding for these things come from like state vocational rehabilitation programs.
Okay.
So the AgrAbility specialist can work with the farmer as a sort of intermediary to help access vocational rehabilitation plans and funding. One of the last cases I worked on was a farmer that had a rollover and lost a leg. Mm-hmm. With AgrAbility, we were able to create a plan to modify his tractor with a seated lift and put hand controls on it, so that even though he, couldn't climb up onto the tractor as he used to, producer was still able to produce his chores and do his job. So they're great in that. But, one of the bigger things for me is always this idea of workflow, right? Mm-hmm. So that sort of assessment that you do with those AgrAbility specialists really helps you evaluate if you're receptive, right? I mean, sometimes we just brush things off as, oh, this is another technical person. But if you're receptive to what this report says, it can give you some really smart strategies on how just to limit the amount of stress you're putting on your body and your mind in some cases, and it could be as simple as not lugging 5-gallon buckets for your feed, right? I mean, if you think about
What?
Yeah, no, right? I mean, I know that you and I don't do that.
No.
I mean, it could be as simple as that. It could be, I've been on cases before where we've changed a walkway, changed the way people access the barn, changed the way people are accessing their hay. So it really, on top of helping you try to solve the larger problem, they're also able to come in and help you devise strategies that can limit the amount of stress that you're putting on your body. Especially when we talk about veterans in agriculture, right? I mean, there are so many disabled veterans now from the conflicts that we've had that, everybody's got some type of limitation, and most of us don't ever want to admit it. We usually have to have our spouse there one way or the other to what's going on. But to be able to look at this report objectively and say, oh, my work plan is opening me up, because the biggest concern when you've had an accident or an injury farming is actually the secondary injury. When you have an accident or injury, you start modifying the way that you're doing things. I've done this, right? I mean, I had a back surgery 2 years ago, and up until that back surgery, I was doing everything wrong. So I ruined my shoulders, and I've done this, and that's because I wasn't cognizant of my, very cognizant of my farm, right, and how things interact and work together, but less cognizant of myself and how my body works together and how everything is symbiotic. So I think it's really important, a really important program, because if the producer takes it seriously, there's a lot of other things that can come out of that other than just getting a lift for the tractor. There's actually the thoughtfulness about how I'm doing my chores, or how I'm doing my daily work, and how I'm approaching it in terms of my health and the way that my body works. So it's a great program, and it's done so much for farmers. And like I said, I mean, some farmers get lifts on their tractors, some farmers get, grain augers that keep them on the tractor instead of getting off and exposing them to risk. But some of us just get, ideas and strategies on how to make sure that we stay healthy for longer so that we can continue doing what we love to do, right? Because that's a whole nother stress factor that comes in when you're unable to do the things that you need to do on a daily basis. So
Right. And I know, I think in the past, I had maybe had an incorrect perception of AgrAbility and thinking, oh, it's only for if you had a farm injury, or only, a very catastrophic injury like losing a limb. But really, they help with things kind of like you mentioned, the workflow, and just dealing with arthritis and just very common ailments that affect farmers' ability to do the tasks on their farm.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is that they have the toolbox, a toolbox, it's online. That's the name of it, not what I'm describing. But they have this online resource where you can go on and access all this different equipment that's available for all these different conditions or challenges that you may face. I mean, and one of them, I joke, I use it on my farm. It's a glove that goes on your hand, but it has a Velcro strap, and that Velcro strap goes around the hand of your shovel or your pitchfork. And so then all of a sudden, it's not my wrist where I have, bad arthritis from multiple surgeries and injuries. It's not my wrist doing the lifting. The shovel actually becomes part of my forearm. So there's a little $8 item that, that's made my life significantly easier. So just being able to see these things and talk to people about how these simple things can make a difference is tremendous. We always say that I always liked it when people would come to me for AgrAbility before they had, like, hey, I'm getting old and my back's hurting, right? Like I'm like me.
Yeah.
What can I do to make sure that I'm not ending up like, the guy that rolled his tractor over or whatever? How can I stay as healthy as I can, as long as I can? And I think that's always been the important thing. That's one of the interesting things and the exciting things for me about AgrAbility as a project as a whole. It helps you think more about yourself and your body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we do that enough. We get so absorbed in our farms and our animals and our crops that we're the last thing that we think about. So having just the opportunity to meet with somebody and talk with them for 40 minutes about your concerns and what limitations you have and how you could potentially be better for yourself by just adjusting your work habits it's really important.
Yeah.
We need farmers and we need them to be healthy.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. And I know that AgrAbility, they don't have active projects in all 50 states, but they do have those resources like you mentioned, and do have specialists on the national level who can still help get connected to programs and resources. So we'll make sure all of that is linked. Definitely we'll link to that toolbox that has all of those great resources and helps farmers identify areas and resources. And like you said, sometimes very simple adjustments that can make a huge difference on your farm. So really thanks for talking about AgrAbility. And for any listeners, if you have questions or think that's something you might want to explore further, Mike is happy to talk to you about that. I know he is a big proponent, as we all are, of AgrAbility. And, and it just makes me think, Mike, what you were talking about of really paying attention to our bodies and ourselves. I know some of our coworkers, Andy Pressman and others, who do a lot with tools and equipment. And I hear Andy talk about all the time, the ergonomics and how we just, historically here in the US don't pay attention to ergonomics in our equipment and use the wrong tools for the wrong things. And, we make things harder on ourselves. I know Andy has been working in that space of, developing tools and equipment and making sure that it's a good fit for our bodies and for the tasks that we have. And that really goes right along with some of those resources through AgrAbility and making sure we're taking care of our bodies and, not hurting ourselves as we farm.
I'm glad you brought that up. I went through one of his workshops. I'll totally blank on how long ago it was, but it was, I think it was entitled Using the Right Tool for the Right Job. And the simplest thing, you're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? It's just because we tend to just grab things like, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but me as a farmer, I'm like, oh, there's a problem. Oh, here's a tool.
Yeah.
The problem. And then I'm halfway in and it's, what was I thinking? I had the wrong tool. And
right.
So yeah, I know that he does put on that workshop. I don't know if that's available online or anything like that, but that was one of my favorite workshops, and it was also one of the ones where I found myself kicking myself the most.
Yeah.
Oh, what was I thinking? That's not what that's for. You mean my cordless drill is not a hammer? Wait a minute.
Right. Exactly. Well, I will make sure and link some resources and make sure Andy can provide some resources for us to link here, because I think that is such an important topic. So thanks, Mike, for sharing about AgrAbility. And so really following along that vein of, we have to pay attention to ourselves as farmers and ranchers and really take care of our bodies, and our minds go along with that. And so another project that you have recently been involved with that I want others to hear about is the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, or FRSAN, as we referred to it earlier. So could you just tell our listeners a little bit about that work?
I guess I can start out and sort of work my way into my specific work on there. An interesting time, and I think that farmers have always been one of the more stressed demographics. I mean, going back to the 80s, we had a farm crisis. We had, out of that farm crisis was born some great national organizations that work to support farmers and ranchers in stress. But suicide rates were exceptionally high, so exceptionally high that you saw things like Farm Aid and the Community Farm Alliance and all these other groups coming together and founding in the 80s to address this issue of, farmer rancher stress and why these suicide rates were where they are. And, we've seen that kick up again. I don't know what the statistic is today, but I remember right the first year after COVID, farmer suicides were approaching the same level as veteran suicides on a daily basis in this country. And it's very troubling. You know, the USDA and these other groups came together and created this pool of funding to support several projects around the country. I work in the Northeast project that's led by National Young Farmers and Farm Aid. And what that is that's utilizing that funding to create resources and collect information about what is causing the stress. How can we help alleviate the stress? And then secondarily, it's about compiling resources so that they're easily accessible for farmers and producers. So if the stressor is a financial problem, there are resources for financial help. You've got, you know, my first call would be RAFI, right? Rural Advancement Foundation International in North Carolina, to help me evaluate my loan programs, to help me evaluate my finances and my options. You know, I don't necessarily have to go right into I'm losing the farm. There are options. The group that I'm working on is actually the veterans working cohort. What we decided, and specifically what we worked on, is we decided that we had two demographics with, you know, high rates of stress at this point. We have farmers and veterans, and we all know the deplorable numbers for, you know, veteran suicides and veteran stress. And like I said, the farmers are starting to creep up there. And as a veteran working group, when we looked at it, we said, well, you know, there's information on both of these demographics, but there's no information on these demographics as one, a farmer veteran. So what we did was we worked to develop a survey so that we could start understanding what the specific stressors are amongst the farmer veteran populations, and then so that we could then create or aggregate resources to support those specific, you know, 5 or 6 overlapping points that are causing that stress. I'm thankful to be a part of, but it's not work that I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a constant reminder that, again, we need to take care of ourselves and we need to take care of each other.
Yeah.
You know, we're not a people that should abide by this, right? I mean, this isn't something that should be acceptable. And I'm not trying to be critical of us. It's just, I think that's, we're caring and loving people as a society and a culture. So it's important to figure out why these things are happening and then create strategies. And I think that's the national goal is, you know, each of these regional projects, our project in the Northeast has like 9 or 10 cohorts. Those working groups are all working within specific demographics of farmers to help identify the stressors and what's going on, and, you know, really understanding why this is happening again. I mean, I think we know why it's happening. It's just, we need to figure out what resources we can compile to help combat it and to help change this flow of this tide, because it doesn't seem to be getting better most days. Not to be a defeatist, but, you know, my feed prices are up 10% every time I go to the feed store. I just talked to a farmer 2 days ago who's in complete panic because he ordered his fertilizer for the year and it went from $18,000 to $47,000.
Oh my God.
That's stressful.
Yeah.
And short of going back and altering supply side economics and this sort of, you know, all of that that's taken place, we have to find ways that we can support and protect each other. I mean, it's not, at this point, you know, the work of FRSAN, you know, it's about support, but I think it's more about protection. How do we protect these people? How do we protect these people are our people, right? I mean, these are people, you know.
These farmers, that's us.
You know, I know a lot of people think that carrots come in a plastic bag from the grocery store, but there's some guy like you or some lady like you, me and lady like you that are, you know, out there growing that carrot or caring for that cut of meat that you're buying at the grocery store. And I think, you know, going back to my agrarian, you know, my sort of agrarian background and thinking, how can you expect to be nourished? And maybe I'm being too again, philosophical, but how can you feel completely nourished picking up a cut of meat in the grocery store, knowing that this farm crisis is going on? And we have to figure out how to draw connections and get people back connected to the fact that farmers really are the lifeblood of this country. I mean, if you take them away, there's no food and there's no care for the soil. And so I think that FRSAN is really about figuring out how we can create support systems and networks that protect our farmers in the future.
Right.
Because if you look at those, I mean, nobody else is going to want to go farming. If you look at you start looking at the stress numbers and the suicide rates and the financial failures and all these things happening going in agriculture. And then, you've got the USDA out saying, well, we need millions of new farmers in the next 3 years. Come on in, people. You're like,
right.
What? Well, I'm going to be a trash man. Forget that. Like whatever.
Right. Anything else.
That's got a pension and stability.
Yeah.
So it's important work, and there's there's tremendous amount of people working on it. I mean, my cohort alone has 8 people. That Andy's working on 2 cohorts from our office. Lee's working on a cohort. So there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to make the situation better. And I think that's the start, right? Is figuring out where the major challenges and, there's got to be overlap in what these choking points are for stress, and trying to identify those is critical to resolving.
Right. And I think, the really important thing for listeners to understand is there is help. There is help out there. Please, get in contact with us at NCAT through ATTRA and help provide you with resources and get you connected to programs that can help. We have to pay attention to ourselves, as you said earlier, Mike. We have to take care of us, the farmers, in order, to keep farming. And so whether that be through the stress aspect and just, the mental health and all of the factors that go into being a person, or even the physical side, as we talked about through AgrAbility, there's a lot we need to pay attention to. And the good news is there are folks who have all of this resources and information and ways to help. And so please do reach out if any of this, sounds like something you need assistance with. That's why we're here. And I'm really why I wanted you to share, Mike, just because I think it's the FRSAN network is newer. And so I think it's something that a lot of folks haven't heard about. And once again, I will link that program in the show notes. And I know we have some newly developed resources on the ATTRA webpage that have come out of this work. And so just really, really thankful that we are able to be a part of this network and helping provide these resources. As you said, it's work we wish we didn't have to do, but it is vitally important to, the sustainability of our farms. Absolutely. So we're here to provide that assistance.
One of the things I love about NCAT and ATTRA, I'll give us a plug right now. Everybody that works here cares, right? And everybody that works at NCAT or ATTRA cares about farmers.
Yeah.
And I would go so far as to say we love farmers.
Yeah.
There's no shame in calling us and telling us that you're having a hard day. And there's also no shame in you calling me and asking me if I'm having a bad day either. So I would just encourage anybody, if there is, we're definitely a group of people that have a strong compassion and care for farmers. So just don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call and ask for help, because it's what we're here for. And that's, just because we don't like to do something doesn't mean we're not going to do it to the best of our efforts. So just,
absolutely,
don't hesitate to connect with us if you have some sort of concern or issue that we can help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for saying that, Mike. You've shared some really good resources and talked about some great programs today, but just kind of as we close things out, are there any other programs that, you think farmers should know about, or in particular farmer veterans should know about? Anything as we wrap up? I don't want to miss something if you have a really good program.
It's impossible not to miss something.
Well, that's true. That's true.
First I'll hit some regionally specific things, not because they're of their importance to people around the country, but because I think that these things are happening in every state around the country. So you're seeing, here in Kentucky, we have cooperative extension and several of our agricultural development people hosting get-togethers and workshops and all sorts of things like that are important to veterans. They did a presentation last week in Western Kentucky on helping farmer veterans access institutional markets. So really important to plug into your local resources, whether that's your Department of Agriculture. And then, another interesting for the veterans out there, the DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, has started a new business development program that I've participated in two of their workshop sessions on that helps you, number one, not only evaluate your business plan, helps you determine its feasibility, and then also helps you navigate through financing that business. And that's a big one. I mean, the DAV is a big national organization. I actually know for a fact that the four guys I work with up there are farmers.
Okay.
So they understand agriculture. Of course, there's the Farmer Veteran Coalition, which has, I don't think it has a state chapter in every state, but there are state chapters, and those state chapters are great ways to connect and network with other veterans in your region. Of course, we have, Margo, your program, Arm to Farm, which I'm a huge fan of, primarily, because it seems that people go through it, it becomes more peer-to-peer.
Yes.
It's always better to hear from a farmer than a specialist. As I downplay myself there.
Yes, exactly.
So those are a couple of things, but I would encourage, everybody to find out what's going on in their state. Because most states, the USDA is pushing out funding, prioritizing veterans and other underserved populations. And so there's bound to be something in your state. And if you have questions about that, you can contact me or Margo, or the Arm to Farm website is a great resource for what's going on, but it's more than likely that we can find out pretty quickly if we don't know what's going on in your state, and help get you connected to the people in your state that are doing work. Not that we don't want to continue to support you and we're trying to brush you off to the state, but just to say that it's always better to have a local resource on top of your national resource.
Exactly. And, Mike, as you were, sharing some of those resources, Farmer Veteran Coalition and your extension and other state groups and FRSAN, it just makes me think being connected to other people, you aren't in this alone. There are other farmers or other farmer veterans in your own neighborhood who have some of the same challenges and, have ideas and solutions, and just having that network, I think, is really important for farmers to learn from. Absolutely. But just to have that support from. So even though I didn't really think about it ahead of time, they all are connected and are ways that are really important for farmers to kind of receive and give that support. So we'll make sure we link all those programs that you mentioned. And yes, absolutely. If you need help finding something in your area, give us a call. We know a lot of people and a lot of programs all over the place. And so we're happy to help make some connections.
Not to harp on the stress thing, but I'm connected to a lot of people because of my work, right? Because I work here at NCAT and ATTRA. But if you think about it, maybe I'm speaking to the producers more, but when you're out there in your field, you're alone, and you're working. But I get reminded every day that I'm not alone because of my job. So it is important to connect with those people, because if I did not have my job, I can probably with 95% surety tell you that I would not be connected and I would not be talking to other people. I would be in the woods alone, as my wife. Just again, don't feel like you have to stay out in the woods alone. There's a huge network of us out here that are doing the same work as you are as a producer, and it's a very supportive community. So don't hesitate for any reason to access that community and ask for help, or more importantly, offer help. Because even as a producer, I can always, and a specialist, I can always use help, and I can always learn from somebody else. So don't feel like you're alone, and don't hesitate to join these networks, because I think that you'll find something that benefits you. I guarantee it, whether it's what you were looking for or not, it may well be what you needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mike, so much for visiting with me today and talking about programs that, have helped you and things that you see can be really beneficial to farmers all across the country. So thanks for sharing with us today, and talk again soon.
I'm sure of it. I'm going to need some help, so I'll call you.
All right.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.